Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and today I'm going to be bringing to you my thoughts and initial impressions on the Master Rule update that will be coming to the OCG this upcoming April 2020. Now, there is a lot to say, and this is a very drastic change, as I'm sure you guys have all seen by now, but I will actually keep this rather brief, and brief for my standards is about 10 minutes or so, because there is potentially still more details on the way and things that we are not sure of that might come with more time. So yeah, without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive on into this. So for those of you guys who aren't aware, basically you can now summon Fusion, Xyz, and Synchro monsters directly from the extra deck to the main monster zones without having to actually summon to the extra monster zone or to the zone that the link monster points to, which is a huge shift in the dynamics of these mechanics, which is really exciting. Additionally, this doesn't actually affect pendulums and links. Those cards will still operate identically to the way they do in Master Rule 4, so those will actually remain unchanged for the time being. Furthermore, there is still a bit of a clarification that needs to be made if summoning to the extra monster zone is a requirement before actually taking advantage of this new mechanic, or if you can just straight up summon to the main monster zones immediately. Now, this actually is not going to be limited to one of each type of the aforementioned extra deck type monsters, so I'll put up a graphic on the screen right now from the Yu-Gi-Oh organization, which I'll also link in the description box below, which basically translates the live stream from Konami last night, basically clarifying this. Finally, there is actually no new summoning mechanic, at least as of the time of me recording this video, so this won't actually impact the game in that respect as far as adding new things to the game. It'll just change the way that we fundamentally play with the cards that we currently have. So these are my initial impressions and how I feel about this. Basically, it's going to raise the ceiling of a lot of the combo decks, especially the ones that were deemed unplayable by Master Rule 4 or at least significantly nerfed. You can think of decks like DDDs, Synchro Spam, just the types of decks that either required an archetypal link monster or the abuse of generic link monsters like Isolde, Summon Sorceress, and Crystron Needlefiber. Now keep in mind that there are actually a lot of decks that are already good in Master Rule 4 that'll be buffed by this, Lunalights for example, but the decks that can actually benefit from this will definitely see a nice boost to their playability. Additionally, it basically turns the game back into Master Rule 3 in a way. It almost does away with the requisite link mechanic. It's just that links will now sort of be relegated to this status of cards that will be, you know, the best of the best, like either the ultimate combo enablers or the ultimate, you know, utility monsters, which I'll touch on in a bit. And of course, pendulums are going to be relatively untouched, but even they get a little bit of a boost as far as being able to summon their extra deck negations in zones, you know, that aren't pointed to by link monsters. You can think of stuff like Odd-Eye's Vortex Dragon and things of that nature. So even pendulums get a bit of a boost. They can spam the board after their pendulum summon and kind of just go off with their additional extra deck summons, which is a boost to them as well. And it actually makes zone placement a little bit less of a deal, especially when you consider the zones that, you know, are going to point to your opponent's main monster zones, given the fact that, you know, those only really impact pendulums and links now, since you obviously don't have to care about the main monster zones, at least which ones you're going to be summoning to. So yeah, zone placement only is really going to matter if you plan on co-linking stuff or, you know, spamming multiple link monsters onto the board, etc, etc. So the impressions and predictions that I have as far as how this will affect the metagame is that the game will probably speed up extremely quickly. You guys remember how Master Rule 3 was, where you could pretty much just, you know, load up the board with as much as you wanted to. It facilitated OTKs and combos very quickly, except now we have the acceleration of the very strong link monsters in our arsenal, as well as whatever other, you know, summoning mechanics that you want to incorporate into your combos. You are now no longer restricted in your sequencing, and it makes that a lot less important. So like I just mentioned, combo players will have the flexibility of utilizing whatever extra deck monsters they choose, and they don't have to actually, you know, like pick one over the other. They don't have to pick necessarily a synchro monster or an Xyz monster over a link monster or vice versa. So it makes the game a lot easier on players who want to try and navigate boards, as well as those who want to build boards very, very effectively. And as far as control decks are concerned, like the trap-based strategies, they will definitely have to be focused on hand traps or, just very, very strong like auto win cards or high impact cards to be able to combat the basic buff to every single combo deck out there, because of the fact that these control decks won't actually be benefiting as much nearly to the extent that the combo decks will be. So those decks will have to definitely either play a lot more hand traps to try and combat the first turn boards, or just try and shut out their opponent from playing the game entirely. And speaking of hand traps, we gotta talk about the biggest hand trap ever created in the history of this game, Max C. So I'm on the record saying that Max C is an inherently broken card and limits card design, probably shouldn't come back, but this master rule is actually kind of making me reconsider my stance. With how much you can basically spam the board, like you don't have to be concerned about anything really, like you're almost unrestricted as far as how high your ceiling can be now. Max C might actually be a very needed check on this master rule in particular, simply because now players are sort of just going unhindered with their combo strings and are able to push out so much damage or so many negations early on that it really won't matter what their opponent has unless if they have such a strong deterrent like Max C. But of course, you guys can definitely feel free to debate that in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And finally, I think that generic links, as far as arrows are concerned, things like maybe B-Cop, Lambda, etc., will probably be falling out of favor a bit in exchange for either utility pieces, things like Phoenix and Borosword, as you guys see on screen here, or things like Dragoon Knight Romulus or the Guard Dragons, or Sir Yugioh potentially, cards that will contribute to combos in addition to the Synchros, Xyz, and Fusion monsters. So all in all, I think that this is a very drastic change. So my personal opinion on it is, of course, that I am welcome to the idea because I like change in Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'm definitely a bit concerned about how this will actually play out in general. Because it is very interesting as far as how it promotes the other summoning mechanics that have been pushed to the wayside over the past 3 years, but it definitely can give its way to just making the game accelerate beyond what we've seen before, which, if you can believe it, yeah, the game can even get faster than it is currently. So I think that it can definitely speed the game up a bit too much, and as a combo player myself, I definitely am excited to try out the combos involving certain monsters that I might have not been able to incorporate prior to this Master Rule update, but it definitely can be a bit too on the drastic side. It also definitely makes the Link monsters, I wouldn't say invalidated, but it definitely sort of narrows the scope of which Link monsters will actually be utilized, which in a way actually creates more like sort of pseudo space in the extra deck. And what I mean by this is that extra deck space was typically tight in the past few years because there were so many Link monsters that you just had to include in order to continue your plays. But now that you can cut some of those filler Link monsters in exchange for just the ones that are absolutely necessary, you're now able to incorporate the utility monsters that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do so otherwise. You can think cards like maybe Tornado Dragon, or Phantom Knight's Breaksword, or Black Rose Dragon, Stardust Dragon, things like that, that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise included, that you can now sort of tailor to whatever strategy you are playing. So it makes deck building a bit easier as well. And this could also make power creep a bit worse, as in addition to all of this, simply because now the Link monsters have to be so powerful in order to compete with the very strong toolbox and bevy of just other extra deck type monsters that are currently in the game. So in order for those new releases to actually compete with the already existing card pool, Konami's gonna have to really make things super powerful, at least if they don't want to keep the meta game the same, unlike what they've shown in 2019. But I digress with that point. The point of this being that you might actually see the game increase in speed, not only because of just the way players are comboing, but because of the card pool being introduced. And I will say actually that it does reward players who can actually navigate this new master rule, I feel, pretty well, because even though it is, you could argue, easier to set up boards and break boards and stuff like that, you can also take creative liberties and play the game in a way that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise thought of prior, and it'll reward players who will be ahead of the curve and really showcase deck building and technical play skills to a pretty solid extent. But those are just my thoughts on this new master rule. It is very, very drastic and will shake up the game quite a lot, but I would love to hear your guys' opinions. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Really hope you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comment section down below. Feel free to subscribe for more informative and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. If you want to, you can follow me on Discord, Twitter, or Twitch, all 3 links in the description as always. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will catch you in the next video. See you guys!